Hello everyone, in this video I will show you some best zombie games in 2020 for PC, PlayStation 4, Xbox One and Nintendo Switch. But before we start this video, make sure you subscribe to your channel Games Down and hit the bell icon for more gaming videos. So without any further ado, let's start this video. The first game of this video is Resident Evil. When the original first launched in 1996, it introduced a variety of mechanics that would help it stand out on the late 90s scene and help define the future Resident Evil games. The player needed to carefully handle their inventory and ammo as they explore the chambers of a mysterious mansion, solving puzzles and dealing with threats that consist not only of zombies but also other, nastier creatures. The original Resident Evil is the kind of game where you'll be charging into hordes of zombies with guns blazing. Instead, it is a slow, methodical survival horror game where even a single zombie can pose a significant threat if the player is not careful or adequately prepared. Next up we have Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 was a critical game, not only for the Resident Evil franchise but also for the video game industry as a whole. Where the older Resident Evil games used a fixed camera perspective, Resident Evil 4 featured a brand new over-the-shoulder view, something that influenced many horror and action games that would come after it. It is more action-oriented than the older games. Yet, it comes across as somewhat clunky by today's standards. The player has access to a variety of upgradable weapons that they can unlock throughout the game. The combat has more depth than any of the previous entries in the series. Moving on, we get to an enormously popular multiplayer-oriented title that is Left 4 Dead 2. The sequel to the original Left 4 Dead improved upon the base set by the first game by adding new maps, weapons, items, enemies, and game modes. The gameplay consists of up to 4 players working in tandem to navigate a series of maps that constitute different campaigns, each with different environments and unique roadblocks that make them feel distinct from one another. Despite its age, Left 4 Dead 2 holds up well even a decade later. It is a game that can be played in short bursts, and you can get it for what is essentially pocket change when it goes on sale. Next, we have another game that places a big accent on cooperative play, though the actual gameplay mechanics are very different. While Left 4 Dead 2 is a straightforward action game with relatively small maps, Dead Island is an open-world RPG and its gameplay mechanics have a little more depth. The game features 4 pre-made characters, each of whom has got some unique abilities and skill trees. On top of that, there is an inventory and a crafting system, along with plenty of side quests, basically all the stuff that you expect to see in a modern action RPG game. Naturally, there is also a variety of melee and ranged weapons available, allowing for some interesting combinations in co-op play. Up next, we have another open-world zombie game from the developers of Dead Island, and the influence is pretty evident from the get-go. However, Dying Light tones down the RPG elements somewhat in favor of a more direct action-oriented approach. The game's most notable feature is its heavy focus on parkour mechanics, allowing the player to quickly traverse the world and maneuver their way around urban environments. The focus is mostly on melee combat this time around, and the game fares much better as a single-player experience, though a co-op mode is, obviously, available as well. Next, we have something completely different: Telltale Walking Dead series. You probably heard of this series if you a fan of the show. Still, even if you are not, the original game is the one that started the avalanche of episodic narrative-focused games in the mid-2010s. Telltale The Walking Dead features little in terms of conventional gameplay, as it is heavily scripted and driven mostly by the story. There are some simple puzzles to solve, and the action sequences are primarily quick-time events, but generally nicely executed, and there is more than enough tension to go around. Now, this series has been going on for a while, and it has only finally concluded in 2019. It consists of 4 seasons as well as The Walking Dead mission and an optional DLC titled 400 Days. Next up we have The Last of Us. No zombie game list would be complete without The Last of Us, a game that is one of the most notable highlights of the genre. Released in 2013 as a PlayStation 3 exclusive, The Last of Us is an outstanding game on virtually every front. It has engaging gameplay, both action and stealth, a beautifully designed world, a well-written story, and believable characters. Unfortunately for Xbox and PC users, the game remains a PlayStation exclusive confined to the PlayStation 3. At the same time, a remastered version featuring updated graphics and improved performance was released for the PlayStation 4. Next up we have Days Gone. Days Gone is another PlayStation exclusive, one that has launched relatively recently, too. And while it may not be as good as what we used to seeing with PS exclusives in recent years, it is still a solid game and is worth playing if you eat into this particular subgenre. From a gameplay standpoint, Days Gone is similar to your typical open-world action game, with a surprisingly engaging main story and a plethora of not-so-engaging side quests. Some of these consist of wiping out freaker nests and hordes, bandit outposts, hunting down people with bounties on their heads, etc. It features both ranged and melee combat, along with a simple leveling and crafting systems. Next, we have Project Zomboid. Project Zomboid, an indie game whose development started back in 2011. Currently, the game is still in its alpha stage and is available as an early access title on Steam. Project Zomboid places a simple yet not so simple task before the player survives. There is no story, no specific goals, and the only mission that the player has is to survive as long as possible. While it may not look like much at first glance, this is probably one of the better zombie survival sandboxes out there, and the game is not even finished yet. The last game of this video is The Last of Us Part 2. The long-anticipated sequel to The Last of Us is now released for the PlayStation 4. The gameplay will mostly remain the same, combining stealth and action segments, though the game will have some new features, items, and weapons. If the gameplay mechanics, environment design, story, and characters all come together as well as they did in the original game, then The Last of Us Part 2 is bound to become an instant classic. As mentioned above, the game will launch for the PlayStation 4. However, it will also be playable on the PlayStation 5, seeing as the upcoming new console will feature backward compatibility with PS4 games. So that's it guys, thanks for watching this video. Subscribe to your channel Games Down and press the bell icon for more gaming videos.